Okay, so we're officially recording. This is the
Hey, I think are we recording? Oh, there we are.
building query calls.
I don't know if Rico knows he's muted. But
Building query call for September 30th, last day of Q2 2019.
I think it's Q3, but that's okay too.
Oh my God, it is.
Amazing. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. So I think today we're continuing a discussion that we started last call around basically what does this download button do? By download button, I'll share a screen just really quickly so that we're all looking at the same thing and we know exactly what we're talking about. Let's share desktop one. Sure, why not? But if we look at cloud slash, sure, let's do this IRS 990 filing. This download button currently does nothing, and we need to make it do something. One of the things we've been talking about a bunch internally is if you go, we have this notion in Git of a Git. So if we go to the query thing, we have something, I chose the most roundabout way to navigate to a clone or download button, but we have this thing. So one of the proposals that we've been talking about internally is that this thing is very similar to the way that we've been, I'm now gonna open a text editor. I apologize. I'm just gonna use every tool under the sun today. Identify this, new window. Go on, new window. No. Okay, let's try this. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Okay, cool. Make this really big. Cool, do this. So we have this sort of like notion of a URL. And currently the way that we add stuff in query is sort of this like Rico, which is like the name of the peer name slash data set name. So we call this a data set reference. And the last one we wanted to bring up is the idea of having something called a QRL, which is basically query slash Rico slash data set name, which could also be expressed as HTTPS query.cloud slash Rico slash data set name. So this is a classic URL. This is a QRL. And the reason that we want to bring this up is just to sort of look at this notion of if this download link sort of said, hey, you need to use something that looks a lot like a URL, if we can bring the friction down on adding something. So you would ideally take this. You could either take any three of these. So this, or this, and punch it into Qri Desktop and hit add and just do the name here, then we're good to go. And that ideally brings down the friction required to actually get a data set into desktop, and we can start to think about replicating. But like what that really is going to accomplish is a lot of the goals that we talked about in the past, Kevin, of like that's actually participating in this sort of world of cloning data in a smart way instead of in a sort of one-off way. So I think the questions for today are like, does that make sense as a default? Do we also want to include a link to do the sort of dumber style of downloading? And we still haven't really finished talking through the sort of like terminology around what that whole add process is and maybe renaming add. So I think I saw something in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing really quick. Oh, there's Rico's sharing the
Just a link to the agenda, yeah.
Yeah, first impressions from that?
Yeah, that was actually one of the first questions I was going to ask, like for the, we'll just say rep button, or, you know, because it's not downloading, because downloading is like that very specific, just a CSV file. And then that was the question I was going to ask was like, you know, if we wanted to encourage people to use Qri Desktop, would that be some special file with an extension, which is what QRL is? And then like, how would that be opened, or like how would they like find desktop to actually open that QRL?
Chris, I think you had some thoughts on this?
I actually have, as we've been talking, going through the same motion of what it actually does on GitHub, because it gives you this open desktop thing right here. If you click on that, it says, do you really want to open this in GitHub Desktop? And you say yes, and then it actually just fills in the modal for you and fires it up. And I'm like, that's pretty sweet, but I've never actually used that ever until like right now. But maybe that's maybe that's something people might actually use. So I don't know. That's a thought. I just think that yeah, I mean, like I think the GitHub, you know, if you click on this guy, it says use Git. You know, that's like, you have to already know what Git is, but we can simplify the language in that and just be like, either. Well, no, I think we can. Maybe it's just an assumption that we can say like, yeah, we expect you to be a GitHub Desktop user to get any value out of this, and you know, go download Desktop, or if you already have Desktop, then like maybe we can make it more clickable. Yeah, but I don't know. I think that's worthy of emulation.
Agreed. That makes sense. So there is a Git desktop application. I don't think I've ever even realized that was a thing.
You're muted, Chris.
Mute. Okay, yes. Looks very similar to Qri Desktop because we copied it. Because we took inspiration from it. Sorry. So yeah, if I click on a repo, you can see the changes that I have in progress, and you can see the whole commit history. But yeah, this has been a companion for Git user. I find it is. I actually teach this a lot when I teach new people how to, people who are beginners how to use Git, and then I also have been using it quite a lot lately because it gives you a nice like visual diff before you commit. So I use that as kind of like a visual check myself before I make a commit on something. So it's there and it's a thing. It's useful.
That's cool. I think it makes sense to borrow inspiration because the models are so, like the conceptual models are so similar.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a nice, it graphs very nicely because it's version control and we're trying to like visualize and understand different versions. Just folding in some of what Rob was saying is I think it's worth, okay, that's kind of the sort of like near term thinking. It's like this QRL thing to sort of help. I think we sort of run into a pretty interesting problem that we were really getting close to last week with this notion of the experience of kind of replicating data being almost like a separate conversation from editing data. And both, it sounded like Kevin and Rob and myself included, like when we put our edgy hats on, we're really talking a lot about replication. Some definitely like authorship is part of it. And I think with Desktop, we now have a really nice flow for authoring data sets. But then what about this person who like primarily has this interest in just like, I just want to have this data set. I don't actually need to edit it. And there's a real, like, and so we're thinking in very long term here, like we can't build this anytime soon, but there's sort of this fundamental sort of belief and ground truth with Desktop that like, if you add something to Qri Desktop, you want to edit it. Like you want to sort of like, we put you into an edit modality, we put you in, so if you do edit something, it sort of like forks it right then and there. And so Rob had been talking last week about this idea of like a toolbar sort of like thing that sits in your toolbar that says, hey, you're replicating data. And that to me is really interesting and something that I think we should sort of think about here about how separate that is from the desktop experience, and if it's worth adding some things into Desktop now that would sort of set the stage for such a tool if we think it should be something that's separate. I think the questions that I sort of want to ask for you, Kevin, is like, as someone who's like replicating information, like what are our primary concerns when we're sort of thinking like firmly putting on the edgy hat and like, rather than me doing it and trying to like talk to myself, just hearing it from you, like I think would be really helpful surrounding like, okay, we sort of know what desktop does, but like how would it be different to ideally fit for like replicating user, the edgy sort of use case?
I think this would be really short because I only thought about it quickly, but just seeing like what data sets exist on locally on your computer, and also being able to like quickly pin or unpin. So saying like which ones I want to replicate, like share, like be a peer of, be a node in, or not. And I think that's like it. You know, it's like, oh, like whether 1999, whether 2000, whether 2001, I have all these things, but right now I just want to like replicate, share, seed 2000, and I can turn on and off for whatever. That ability is to like pin and unpin very quickly and to see what is pinned or not pinned.
Yeah, that's great. And so like, I'm going to share my screen again really quick with desktop open, because I feel like we're actually getting pretty close there. Like if I'm currently looking, hopefully you can see this. I'm going to hide this so it's not confusing what we're looking at in this. So this is desktop as it stands right now, and I have this list, right, of my data sets, and I can literally see these are data sets that are on my machine. If this is not currently on my machine, it'll display a little broken link icon here that says, hey, you have a reference to this data set, but that you don't actually have it saved locally. And then if I click into my history tab, the next thing that we're going to be the thing that we need to ship is like actually a very connected problem where right now I'm following my username on this right now is Betamax. I'm following Rico, and so this is Rico's data set, right? And so this Rico is going to add versions to this data set. So he generated the funder data set 3 days ago, but eventually he's going to add a new commit, and I won't have that commit locally because I haven't chosen to get it, which is very similar to the problem of like pin or unpin, right? So this history tab could literally could function as that. I think the only thing that we need to add to disambiguate these two use cases is if we click on status right now, we're shown like an edit screen. I think if we just put like a very light thing over this that says, hey, this is Rico's data set, you'll have to hit a fork button to edit it. And you just have this like, cool, the editing is like, it's not locked. It's just like showing you like, hey, you have to do this one step that makes the data set yours before you can edit it. And in the case of Edgy or anybody looking to replicate data, you just never click that button. And so this status tab is really not necessary for you. You can just stay on history, and I can right click these versions and say, I want to pin this, I want to unpin this. And we can just do it all through this menu. Does that feel like we're getting close?
I have to test it, but a little bit. I mean, it makes sense though. Yeah. And the fact that you've already thought about it is nice.
Because yeah, we can totally build that. Like that feels really doable. Do you agree, Casey? I'm looking at Casey in real life. She's sitting to my right. But does that feel like, I don't know, anybody have any inputs, any thoughts on
I think it sounds like the right track of, I mean, there needs to be yeah, I think like if it's, I don't know, I'm thinking of the analogs in Git. It's like like there's a fork button, but like, I don't want a fork. I just want to pull down yours, which I can also do. And that's it's a separate action. So yeah, we should be able to, I like the idea of like a read only or sort of just I guess just browse. Like it's like the minute you want to actually make a change, then you have to do this thing that is similar to forking, and that should be a process. It should have like a model that tells you what's actually going on, and then that also comes with like the additional UI and the additional steps necessary to recommend that go back in, which is the data set pull request. So all of that just becomes a special state that is not the same as just pulling down a data set and reviewing it and read onlying it, I guess.
Kind of interesting because we already sort of have already in the app we've sort of obscured this with the way that we're adding data sets now, but when you add a data set, having an FSI link like having a link to your file system and files actually on the file system feels almost like permission, like you should be editing it rather than reviewing. Although others, I don't personally know what it takes to correctly or do a good job of reviewing a data set. Maybe it means pulling it into some other software that you examine it in, but feels like by adding an FSI link, we are giving permission to people to be editing it.
Yeah, that feels like a really interesting point. Like, to close the loop on this, Kevin, like when you add right now by default, it links to your file system, which means that it makes a copy of that CSV file or whatever that structured data is in your file system as well as inside of your IPFS repo. So Casey, I think you have a really good point. Like, wouldn't it be nice if we just said, this is like intentionally just like a read-only copy. And so when you hit add, you just click a checkbox and we say, like, I think we can think about the language here. The version of this, what you would type in Git is called git clone -- bear, which means don't just copy for me the database of Git commits. Don't actually write to the folder all of the actual files of the source code. And so I think what would be nice there is like if you're in the replicating case, you really pointed out that if you're just trying to replicate data, you really don't want that CSV file on your hard drive. You just want to hold the copy in IPFS. You don't actually need you want to be able to export that file whenever you want. And like you have the data, so you should be able to get at it. But most of the data sets that we talk about around Edgy tend to get fairly large, right? They tend to be these like I'm thinking even of the TCEQ data, like that's, like if you were to tail that data set for like a month on the hourly stuff, that'd be like a gig. Yeah, Kevin.
Just a clarifying question. So right now, if you're like pinning something in Qri, it's going to be in the IPFS folder and a different folder on your local computer?
Yes. So the latest version, or the version that you're currently working on, is, and so that's like what we're talking about with this like edit mentality, is like it's copied into a folder for you, so that you can. And what you can do is you can use other tools to edit that stuff. So there's a meta.json file. So if you edit that meta.json with a text editor, that will, and then you can hit save, and that will sort of operate like a staging area. This is exactly the way that Git works. And so like Git keeps a copy inside of a secret folder inside of your folder that has like a database. And then you have the like actual files that you edit, which look like normal files that you talk to. And so Qri is sort of using that pattern in this case by default. Now, if you can remember, before we shipped all this FSI stuff, we just didn't have that at all. And so everything only existed in one place. Does that clarify? Cool. Yeah, I think that's like another huge bit of this, if we like could provide the option for just like not copying that data. Other bit that seems like, I just want to circle in, one other thing that seems like it would be useful kind of on the web monitoring tip, where like eventually we want to ship diffs where you can see displays of what changed between two data sets. So if you were, Rob used the language last week of following, so like I'm following changes on thing. And so if I can see the diff of that and know, oh wow, this is like, now you're able to actually do two things at the same time, right? You're able to replicate that data, but you're also able to sort of like be a set of human eyes taking a look at what changed, right? And so what I'm thinking about is like the TCEQ data. So if, pretend we're in the like golden scenario where we're actually monitoring Texas air quality site stuff before a major fire, and you actually see like a big change in the numbers as they're rolling by, because you see a diff and that number is like much larger than it was before. Or you see edits to the history, right? In some way, somebody editing prior dates. Why did you edit prior dates, right? And being able to see that really quickly, I think is like a really interesting extension of the replicating sort of like follow along style of thinking about a data set. And I don't know that I would call this browsing. I think this is actually following quite specifically. So I feel like we can do the browse experience in query.cloud, but then you sort of explicitly opt in to say, this is data I care about, this is data I replicate, and so I'm kind of following the progress of a data set. And so to me, that I'm intentionally like sort of shoehorning that so that we can justify putting this into desktop and just say that this is like fine, because it kind of feels like something that needs a different name than browsing, which to me is like search, and like really, really rich metadata first viewing. Like I'm really interested in like understanding what this thing is, and then and only then will I kind of dig in on the data. But like once I've made a decision, I've done all the browsing, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to replicate this. Ideally, I have I copied that QRL, I punch that into Qri, I hit add, and now I have very fine-grained tools for managing what I'm pinning. And it feels like we need to ship visualizations or representations of the actual consumptions, like the space required on your hard drive. So you can see like, oh, pinning this data set is costing me X, right? And these two, and the nice thing about Qri is because it's versioned, like two versions of something don't cost you 200%. Like it's not, like there's a bunch of overlap. So you can actually see adding this version will cost you 5 megabytes versus adding this version will, put these two versions together represent, a gig of data. Yeah, this is feeling, I don't know, this feels a lot more doable this week. Kevin, any of that make sense?
No, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like having those type of metrics, I think, are important. Rob had mentioned something in Archive Slack before about like seeing how many other nodes are holding a piece of data, and I think that you could do that in IPFS, right? You can see like what IP addresses are holding a hash, a CID. So making that, like surfacing that in the cloud might be a way to kind of nudge people like, hey, not a lot of people are holding this, and if you care about it, maybe you should like be holding this too. So like metrics like that are very important, I think.
Deeply agreed. I think that's the big feature to ship on this side. To connect some train cars there, we won't accept certain sizes of data, right? So like if you try to send a 250 megabyte data set to Qri.cloud right now, we just can't have everybody doing that, so we don't accept it. And what we're going to say is, you should pin this, you should host this data, and on Qri.cloud, we still want to give you a download button. We want to give somebody a download button and just flow that through the peer-to-peer network, right? And so that's where we really need to surface that. Hey, this is not hosted on Qri, but it's available for download. And there are 3 peers replicating it right now, right? So there's 2 very, very useful use cases. Like one, a crowd of folks who are just very interested in keeping that replicating count high. And another set of folks who are just interested in, is that data available at all? Because it's very large and it isn't willing to be hosted by the cloud folks. In both contexts, we really need to be able to surface that number. Since that's a feature that I think we should really be aiming for. It's a very hard figure to get meaningfully, because it is actually something that you need to be constantly updating. And so anytime that needs to express constant liveness about a dynamic system that is unbounded in size is a really difficult thing to do properly. That doesn't mean we can't try, and that doesn't mean we can't, like, okay, cool, last time, you can build some smart techniques that say we did one giant sort of walk of the network and said, okay, we know these hashes were pinned by these peers, and we know these ones. And the other upside is Qri.cloud has a good list of the hashes that we care about. Not all of IPFS, right? We don't have to look at everybody's entire pin list. And then we can sort of build up that and then use that cache as like a sort of approximate figure for what's available. But very doable. I think the earliest we would see that is probably like Q1 2020. Like, I don't think we're going to be able to ship that anytime soon. But the stuff that we talked about leading up to that, I think feels very doable. And I think it'd be really exciting to ship that last. Like, this is how many replicas are available. Anybody want to jump in on that? Feels like a really clear, yeah, Rico.
I was just going to say it's kind of the mirror case of providing that number to show the data set's popularity, and that being a reason why you'd want to follow it or keep track of it or help steward it, versus someone seeing the exact opposite, which is that it only exists in one place, therefore you might replicate. I think it's interesting.
That's a really good point. I think that adds a really interesting dimension to that. It would almost say 240 people have replicated this, 4 of them are online, 1 of them are online, right? Like the actual distinction between like who's copied, and not who in the individual sense, but how many folks have copied, and then how many folks are currently online. I'm thinking about Reddit's online users versus size of community count. I think this is really common. sort of metric. This is amazing. We can totally build this. We can really build this. Chris,
The Reddit analogy is pretty fascinating. It just like reinforces that we are actually able to start a community around a data set, which I hope, the hope is that becomes like a forum unto itself on Query Cloud for communication, unless that also goes with data sets, but maybe not. But like that would be, that it just, the data set becomes its own entity with its own community and its own life. I don't know, it's just poetic, but it's pretty cool that that's what we're doing. I think the this many users plus this many are online, and then like there's also a bunch of chats and things like that. People forking, popular forks and things that are active on a data set. That would be really cool.
That'd be so dope if when you clicked onto a data set and from Qri Desktop and you were just, there's like a chat available, you could click a chat and it like showed you who was also working on that data set at that moment in time and online. So that'd be amazing. Awesome. Okay, so I think honestly this feels like a really nice cascade where we can sort of see the faraway feature, which is this like replicants and currently online, and then the close by stuff. This actually helps with a number of issues around like what happens when you run add and making sure the user understands that when they start editing those fields and hit save that they're actually performing a forking action. And so we can start to nail down some of that UI, which you just don't do it if you don't want to, if you want to just replicate, and then adding the features around being able to unpin and pin specific versions is the natural next thing that we need to do, because we have that collaboration issue where like Rico's going to cut new dataset versions and I'm going to need to say, cool, I want to pin those as well. And then we can fall onto that with the like last bit of saying like, cool, I just want to follow this dataset, copy it as needed. And once I hit a full IPFS repo, say, how do I manage tails? We can do this. This is really doable. Anybody have anything they would add to that roadmap? Well, that's easy. Kevin, did you have something?
I was just going to say, just write it down.
Yeah. So that's actually one thing we've been trying to work toward a little bit, is like defining milestones around some of this stuff. And so I'll create a milestone and link it on the query.io/query thing. Just because these features are starting to like actually coalesce as like concrete use cases that map nicely to things we can actually turn into issues. But that's awesome. I feel like I have a lot of clarity on how to move forward with that. Yeah, this is like really taking shape. And to me, at this point, what we've articulated is a system that allows somebody who desires to be able to replicate data to be able to do it. And to me, it sort of depressurizes the conversation around like, do we let them have the CSV file or not? It's like, we're going to prioritize this QRL system. And if someone really wants it, we'll give them the like minor, just download this version link. But to me, having the story around replicating data be straightforward is, I think, the more important thing. And that seems to have come out of the last sort of 2 weeks of thinking. It's like, if that process is easy enough, then there's a better chance people will do it and not be frustrated when it's like not behaving exactly as they want. And ideally, that means that we don't need to constantly provide as much of this like direct download of only CSV file, because I just download this app and hit this button. Cool. Neat. I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about today. And I don't feel the need to like consume everyone's full hour for no reason, unless anybody had any agenda topics they wanted to raise. No? Okay. Well, then I think with that, we can call this a call. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I think deliverables out of this. We'll turn this into a milestone. Kevin, I'll CC you on an issue that sort of plans this out on GitHub. And we'll just start grinding this away. I think the time to realize this is going to be, at least a month, but it's definitely doable. And there are things that we can do now that start into the data replication process. Kevin.
Oh, just if we're not done, I had like a tech helps question near the end.
Awesome. Then let's do it.
So I got rid of Qri everything off of my computer, and then just downloaded Qri Desktop. Is this supposed to just work out of the box, or do I still need to install Qri and do Qri Connect for Qri Desktop to work?
Should just work out of the box. Is it not?
No.
What are you seeing?
Wait, hold on. Let me see if I can start up. I did see like the startup screen, like where it's asking me to sign up, email, whatever, and then I'm bringing it up right now. But there was like an error when I tried. I thought it might have been because of the username like uniqueness thing, so I just like appended a number to my screen name, and it still didn't work. So
it's really interesting.
I'm waiting for it to show up. Let's see.
Are you sure the other service is no longer running, even if you deleted things?
Yeah, like when I try to run query from the command line, like it just says it's not found anymore. So like I got rid of like the bin and the folders, and like I just try to remove query, all types of query from my machine, and try to start from scratch. Should I just share my screen with the? Let me see.
If you're cool with that, that'd be amazing. We can debug it.
Yeah. Let's see. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
So I'll just use this like default pure name, I guess.
This isn't Qri Desktop.
Yeah, that's not Qri Desktop.
This is front end. This is our old
Oh.
app, which is probably why nothing's working.
Okay, never mind then. I'll do something
No,
else.
this is amazing.
No, we could.
Yeah, let's watch him. Go get it. No, close this.
You have to-
Close this and go to GitHub.
Oh.
Over here.
Pretty cool. I'll shoot you a link.
Okay.
This will be fun.
Oh, so much stuff. Okay, got this. Let's put this desktop. Sorry, the overlay is not helping me. Look.
Rico, can you mute?
Is it opening?
Yeah, I'd give it a second.
Yeah, sorry, my computer's old and slow.
No judgment.
As a, out of curiosity, what do you know what version of what OS you're running?
Yeah. You probably can't do like all these things at the same time.
Yeah, that's
Screen share is very expensive.
also true.
Let me stop it for a second.
I think it's a good idea.
See what the app comes up. Oh, here we go. Okay. And then I'm running 10.11, 11.6 El Capitan. Okay. So you guys see the Qri Desktop? Okay. So I'm just gonna pretend I know what I'm doing. So do I make something up here? Should I start?
This is a big moment for you, Kevin. You should be able to use your name that if you had one previously, you should be able to use that same one.
Okay. I'll just do something quick. Yeah, that was it. That was the error I was getting before. Invalid character D. I didn't understand what that meant. That
Can you do me a favor? Do you know if you've gotten rid of your hidden query folder, your .query folder?
Let me look.
Because I'm willing to bet that it's pulling from the wrong registry because you still have that folder and it's directing you to the wrong address to be communicating with our like sign-in stuff.
Yeah, where? Oh,
it would be in your root folder, your home folder.
Okay. If I deleted it, do I need to restart desktop or should I?
Yeah, if you end up having to delete it, you should restart desktop. What we do is we look for that folder, and if that folder exists, we pull all of our information from that folder. So if you've already had, so like if you make an update to Qri Desktop, it's not gonna redo everything. It'll just pull all the same stuff from your old Qri folder. But if you have a really old version of Qri, which friends of the project do have old versions of Qri, and there'll be a conflict.
All right, let's see if it works. Ooh,
Hey,
nice.
fun.
Okay. How do we do this? Cool.
I just pasted a link to the Texas data if you want to add that data set.
Okay.
It's in the chat.
Here. And then do I need a directory path or just the reference? What's the directory path for?
I'm just curious, do you mind looking at the little I? I want to see how we explain it in here and decide whether or not we explain it well.
I see. Query will create a new directory for this at this location.
Is that helpful? Or do you still have questions
No,
about?
it makes sense. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah. You're not the only one. So
I just
yeah.
I just wasn't sure if it was mandatory or not. Like if it was just because when you have floaters for stuff, it just like puts it somewhere.
Well, you would have figured out that it's mandatory because it wouldn't let you click the button.
So I can put it anywhere, and I'll just say new folder. Ah, very cool.
Yay!
Hey, nice. Very cool. Sorry, I'm just like clicking all over the place.
This is great.
Oh, very cool. Cool. Okay, I should play around this more on my own time, and I'll have questions and things. But nice, thank you. I got it working.
That's so great. So like, just to like bring the whole thing home conceptually, you're now backing up that data set, right? Like that you have in an IPFS repo, you have that exact hash version in an IPFS repo locally now. And so like, all we got to do is build that out into something that makes that clear and makes it understandable.
But does that mean somebody can get it from me, or is it just me have it locally?
So while you have Qri Desktop open right now, it does. It means that someone could actually get that from you. You're actually on IPFS right now with Qri Desktop running.
Wow. Okay.
And so you're doing all of the peer-to-peer stuff and all of that whole thing. We want to give you finer grained control over that, but for the purpose of data replication, like we're there.
Yeah. That was easy. Sweet.
Awesome. I'm so glad we resolved some of the linking issues around desktop versus front end, and we got it to run on your machine. That's really great.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kevin, we really appreciate any of your feedback on this as you're sort of clicking through it. If you want to try creating your own data set, feel free. There's some stuff in there, but also like as we work through this replication question, I think this would be a great way to sort of follow along.
Yep.
The app that you have does auto update, and so as we issue new stuff, all you need to do is sort of keep query open. I think it only checks for updates on quit and relaunch. And so that's the moment that it'll keep track of new stuff. But if you see like new version of query released, all you need to do is leave the app open for a second, quit it, turn it back on, and it'll update for you. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for testing that out. That a bunch of notes were generated internally around making sure we found a flash on the dataset history that we're going to try and fix. But cool. Thank you so much. And I think with that, does that cover it for everybody? Amazing. Have a wonderful week, everybody.
Yep.
And see you around the internet.
Take care, y'all. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.